Okay. Good morning, everyone. I'd like to welcome everyone to this special meeting of the Boston Art Commission. My name is Karen Goodfellow, and I'm the Director of Public Art in the Mayor's Office of Arts and Culture. In that capacity, I'm also the Director of the Boston Art Commission. Let's all take a moment to update our names and pronouns and make sure that we are muted. In accordance with the Commonwealth of Massachusetts Executive Order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, we are conducting this meeting virtually. To ensure public access to the deliberations of the Boston Art Commission, the public can join this meeting through telephone and video conferencing. For those of you with us today, this meeting is being recorded and closed captioning is available. You can access it at the bottom of the screen. If you have trouble locating the button, please chat us for assistance. The Mayor's Office of Arts and Culture and the Boston Art Commission believe that public art is any artwork installed in publicly accessible spaces where they can be experienced by everyone for free. We engage in discussions about public art in Boston in order to foster the creation and collection of artworks that reflect the people, ideas, histories, and futures of Boston, which is on the traditional homeland of the Massachusetts people. We acknowledge the continuing presence of the Massachusetts as well as the Wampanoag and Nipmuc peoples. We also recognize the Indigenous peoples represented in the city's residents in addition to those in the diaspora. For transparency and community input, artworks proposed for City of Boston property are reviewed and discussed at public meetings of the Boston Art Commission on a regular, usually monthly basis. Working together with the public art team and the Mayor's Office of Arts and Culture, the Boston Art Commission is an independent board composed of 2 ex officio and 7 volunteer community members appointed by the mayor. The BAC has exclusive authority to approve and commission artworks intended to be added to the city's collection or placed on city property. Our meetings are generally held on the 2nd Tuesday of every month, and we'll hope you continue to join us. Our next scheduled meeting will be next Tuesday, November 8th at 4:30 p.m. The Mayor's Office of Arts and Culture's dedicated public art team manages all daily operations and duties related to public art projects cited on or proposed for City of Boston property. This team facilitates the Boston Art Commission's monthly public meetings and manages all phases of Boston's public art projects in collaboration with the Boston Art Commission, community members, and colleagues at the City of Boston. Helping to facilitate this meeting are Sarah Rodrigo, Senior Public Art Project Manager, and Amber Torres, Public Art Project Manager. And Amber will add our information to the chat, or Sarah will. And if you do chat, they'll be there to answer any of your questions. And I will pass to Chair Pasnick.
Okay, thanks, Karen. Welcome, everyone. Happy Halloween. Welcome to the special meeting of the Boston Art Commission. I'm calling this public hearing to order at 9:09 a.m. Today, the Boston Art Commission is holding a special public meeting. I will now take the roll call of the commissioners to confirm a quorum. After I state your name, commissioners, please say here. Aqua Holmes.
Here.
Camilo Alvarez.
Here.
John Andres.
Here.
Cara Elliott Ortega.
Here.
Brian Hone.
Here.
And Kim Blinder.
Here.
And I am here as well, so we have a quorum. On the next slide, I believe you will see today's agenda. The full agenda is publicly posted on the city's website, boston.gov. Typically we would now review meeting minutes, but because this is a special, because this is a special meeting, we will review the October 11th meeting minutes and minutes from this meeting at our next regularly scheduled meeting on on November 8th. So we'll wait for a meeting minute review until that session. I turn it over to Karen.
Great, thank you, Mark. As we all know, on today's agenda, we have the Memorandum of Understanding between the Boston Art Commission and the Boston Foundation for the Embrace and the Memorial Moratorium for the Boston Common. Instead of giving a regular director's report, because today is a special meeting, I won't be working through all the status updates of all the public art projects we're doing now. I do suggest if you're interested that you do come back next Tuesday. It's great to hear about them, but I'll share a few status updates on the Embrace. So first, at the top left of the screen, you can see where we are with the reviews and votes. So final design, the BAC approved final design on March 9th, 2021 for this project, the Embrace. And the vote was said pending that the MOU and its exhibits as currently drafted are accepted, and if there are any substantial changes that they would return to the BAC for further review. So in that, I'll say we are here to finalize the MOU. There have not been substantial changes to the artwork, so we are not highlighting that part of that motion. We are just here to finalize the MOU. And the next item there is the public art moratorium on the Boston Common. We will need to lift that before installation can happen, and that is also on the agenda for this morning. And signage is still not reviewed yet. While this is not on today's agenda, we hope that the design team is able to submit any signage proposals related to the Embrace as soon as possible so that we may review them at our next regular public meeting or the one after that if they're not able to do that. And then ready to install, that's a staff review that happens. And Sarah and I joined a Zoom on, I think it was October 19th to see the status of the patina. You can see some images that were taken that day. The team in Walla Walla had tried different versions of the patina and put water on it to see what it would look like when it is waxed. Yeah, I think it's the 19th, not the 18th as it says there. And we're looking forward to seeing images of the selected patina when it's finalized. And then the final vote that this commission will take on the artwork is the accessioning into the collection, and that happens after installation on all of our public artworks. And this is when the BAC will determine if the artwork is officially in the city's collection. And that is when we will take on care and custody. And just as far as the artwork goes, as you can see, the patina is being finalized. The creating of the artwork, to the best of my understanding, is scheduled to begin this week on November 2nd. Shipping of the artwork is scheduled to begin this month in mid-November. The plaza construction is near completion. The sculpture installation is scheduled to begin in late November, and then the unveiling is scheduled for January 13th, 2022. So we are very excited about the rapidly approaching unveiling and celebrations we will all have soon for this artwork.
Great, thank you, Karen, and we're all excited, I think, as commissioners as well. We will now move on to items on the agenda for review, public testimony, and commission vote. On the screen, you can see how you can participate in today's meeting. During the meeting, please keep yourself muted. If you have technical difficulties during the meeting, you can ask questions in the chat, and a member of staff will help you. After presentations and commissioners clarifying questions, the chair, myself, and Vice Chair Akwa may invite public testimony. If you would like to participate, you can press the raise your hand icon and staff will put you in a digital line for comment. You can also let staff know that you have a question in the chat. If you are calling in, press *9 to raise your hand. Please remember to keep your comments on topic and brief.
Yes, so good morning, everyone. As usual, our goal is to make this meeting a good experience for all and for community members to feel comfortable sharing their feedback and their questions. So again, be mindful of and respectful of other people's time when speaking. Please stay on topic. And if you want to submit longer written testimony, you can send that to bac@boston.gov. If you're called upon, please state your name, title, program, and organization if applicable.
Great. So our first item of business is the MOU for the Embrace. Artist Hank Willis Thomas, proponent City of Boston, Boston Common. Karen, I think, are you giving us background?
Yes, happy to. In 2017, in partnership with what was then becoming MLK Boston and is now Embrace Boston, the Boston Art Commission and the City of Boston began the process of creating an installation commemorating Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s and Coretta Scott King's legacies in our city, our nation, and the world. Since that time, dozens, if not hundreds, of community conversations have been held and public exhibitions hosted, leading to the selection of a site, the Boston Common, and an artist team, Hank Willis Thomas with Mass Design Group, for the artwork. These public community conversations also led to the expansion of the project from a sculptural memorial to an expansive living memorial and legacy project, now championed in the work of Embrace Boston to advance racial and economic justice in Boston today. On the screen is a summarized timeline, just focusing on key decision points related to the BAC and the MOU. You can see just from when we first put out the call, in going forward, we had advisory reviews. The first in October 2019, I think, is when we asked, or the advisory happened before that, but in October 2019, we first asked for the MOU with the BAC, third-party proponent, and the artist, and possibly other departments. Since that time, TBF formed other agreements with Parks and the artist and design team, which did not involve the BAC. So our work on this MOU has been really important in making sure we're tying back together all the work we're doing and to make sure we're all on the same page to care for this artwork going forward. We have appreciated this partnership with Embrace Boston and are excited to finalize some of the important work we have to see through before installation begins. Today's agenda items related to the Embrace are the finalization of the MOU and the lifting of the moratorium on public art for this installation. We are joined by representatives of the city's legal team to answer any questions you may have. And again, we have that timeline for reference if it's helpful, but I think what will be more helpful is that we are joined today by Adam Cederbaum, Corporation Counsel, who is here to speak to the MOU and answer your questions. We have shared this MOU with you in advance of the meeting. So with that, Adam, I was hoping you might introduce yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks very much, Karen. And I guess before I start, also a huge thank you to all of the commissioners for making the time and adjusting your schedules to make today's meeting. And thanks again to the commissioners and to, I see that there are people from Embrace Boston and TBF on this meeting as well. You know, to see those pictures is really exciting. And I know that all of you have put in so much work. I actually, you know, since late 2017. So it's really an honor to be invited to join you today to talk about one little piece of this really exciting and important project for our city. So thank you. I'm also happy to be joined today by my colleague, Jacqueline Munson, who did you know, a lot of the work to actually get this agreement done and finalized. So really thanks, Jacqueline, and also to a former law department employee, Nyla Freeman, who did a lot of the legal work sort of during some of the earlier approval stages of this project with the BAC. Nyla's in New York now, but just wanted to mention that. So Karen, thanks. This timeline is really helpful, I think, to sort of situate us for this half of what the BAC hopefully will do today, which is approve the MOU. So this is a great timeline. And I think the easiest place for me to pick it up is in March of 2021. And I think the reason that's important is because on that day, the BAC gave final approval to the design and also said, you know, Karen, as the director, can enter into an MOU on the BAC's behalf if it's in the form we saw in March of 2021. But if there's changes, we need to come back and show the commission. So that's a really helpful setup because most of the MOA is the same, but there are some changes that I would like to just highlight for you all. Just sort of running through the MOA, I'll highlight, I think, the things that are changed, the reason that we felt we have to come back to the commission to get this approval. So I know people have seen the MOU. I also know it's a lot of paper and a lot of exhibits. It's a lot. I will start by saying, I'll run through it. I'll start by saying, I know also that I understand there's been sort of, I think there's the main changes, things that I think are going to be most interesting to you are some new specificity about maintenance funding, some new specificity about commercial IP rights, and as well as limitations on any proceeds of using those rights for commercial reproduction. So I will run through the MOU now, hopefully very quickly, and really focusing on what's different since March of 2021. So same term. Section 2 lays out the responsibilities of the various parties. And that is generally unchanged. There's not much new there. TBF acts as the funder and proponent, collaborates with the artist to get a contract to fabricate the design. BAC performs its statutory jobs of reviewing and approving. One thing I want to highlight within that is that, and this has been in the MOU all along, the BAC, of course, sort of retains its powers to make approvals. The MOU doesn't do that for you. The only things that are new in there is a commitment for us, the BAC, if we, the city, enter into any sort of agreement directly with the artist, just that we will make sure we show it promptly to Boston Foundation, Embrace Boston. As well as there's also a clear statement that the BAC retains the right to remove the artwork. So that's basically the only changes in that section. So the next big section of the MOU is section 3 about design review. This actually does look different because you guys have already done all the design review. So this is just a much, this is just shortened. It acknowledges that you've done it, and it incorporates as exhibits some of the materials that you have already seen and approved. The next section is where we get, I think, one of our big new pieces of information that I really want to sort of walk through with you all. This is section 4, maintenance plan and maintenance funding. So something, again, most of that section, like all sections, stayed the same. Upon acceptance of the artwork, the city takes on the obligation to maintain and care for the piece. So that's a biggie. That's been in there all along, and we're still on board, right? Also, TBF and Embrace Boston will deliver a maintenance plan created in conjunction with the artist and designer. I know that you all have seen that. It's included as Exhibit A here. It could change. We will formalize that within 15 days of final acceptance, but that's the maintenance plan, and I don't think that any significant changes are anticipated. And finally, there's a commitment in there from the Boston Foundation of $1 million to the continued maintenance of the artwork. And when they say artwork, or we say artwork there, that is separate from the plaza. I want to pause here to note that that figure is the same figure that's sort of been in all iterations of the MOU that the BAC has seen over the years. I also want to say that the WU administration recognizes that accepting this artwork means accepting the responsibility to care for it, right? That $1 million figure may or may not, likely will not, be enough to meet all of the piece's maintenance needs over time. In the city, in this administration, understand that and are committed to appropriating funding as needed to allow the BAC to take on this additional obligation, sort of without impeding the other work that you already do with your existing collection throughout the city, in our neighborhoods, both downtown and well, downtown and not. Which brings us to what's new here with respect to funding. So one thing that's new is the specific commitment of $1 million for the artwork itself remains in there, because that's what was always there. But based on the experience to date, TBF has now pegged its initial combined maintenance fundraising goals, and by combined, I mean artwork and plaza, at 2.5 million. So the sort of collective the collected maintenance commitment is already a little ahead of where we anticipated. I also know, and we have people from TBF and Embrace Boston on this call, that the foundation considers this sort of a shared commitment over time, and that I don't think, there's no limitation, right? There's no limitation of 2.5 overall. So, the sort of partnership that you all have created over the last years, and the sort of shared commitment to this piece and its place in the city and what it stands for will be ongoing. And we are lucky to have sort of a partner whose expertise is raising money to support this type of work in the city. Those funds, the 2.5 million, which, as I understand right now, some are in hand, some are donor commitments right now, so it's not all there right now, will be held by the Boston Foundation as a separate fund called the Embrace Memorial Preservation Fund. So that means the money will sit at the Boston Foundation and will be invested and managed by the Boston Foundation until disbursements come to the city. Disbursements come to the city in two ways under this agreement. The first is that an automatic annual grant to the city of 5% of the amount of the Memorial Preservation Fund, right? And that's automatic, and will come to the city basically to be split, half to parks, because they're responsible for maintaining the plaza, half to the BAC to be dedicated to maintenance of the artwork itself. And again, I sort of go back to the comment I made earlier. I think we all understand, certainly in some years, that 5% may not meet the maintenance budget. In the city, and the administration understand that by accepting this thing, that is the city's obligation. Right? A second way that money comes to the city is that the city, sort of the BAC or parks, can simply request funds out of the Memorial Preservation Fund to pay for maintenance or repairs or something that needs to be done. And, that request, obviously, it has to be for preservation or maintenance of the artwork. We do have to provide it in writing to the Boston Foundation. We have to be clear about what we want the money for. We have to be clear about what we estimate the work to cost. We have to be clear that Parks agrees with the request, which is something we can manage internally. And finally, when we do that, they have sort of a 10-day turnaround to deal with that request. So the money is really fairly accessible to us, especially when combined with the annual maintenance grant. One last difference in this section of the MOU, and I'm happy to address this stuff again in questions if you have them when I'm done. I'll just keep going through. But one last section in this MOU is when the city makes, for 25 years, if we make sort of substantial repairs to the piece, not regular maintenance or little fixes, we do need to check in with the artist to make sure that, to sort of coordinate those repairs and make sure that he is okay with the plan to repair. The next, and I think the last section of the MOU that I'll talk about, because everything after that is basically boilerplate, I think, is a section titles and warranties. The warranties are substantially the same as in prior versions. Basically, they're referred to in the deed of gift, which is only a sample deed of gift right now, that we will receive with the piece. And so those basically are that it's an original artwork, that it's not a danger to public safety, that maintenance will be in line with the maintenance plan that we received, that the piece will not degrade and is free of defects in workmanship and materials, and that it will not deteriorate as a result of the Massachusetts climate, especially winters. Right? Second, with title, we receive not only the piece, but certain intellectual property. Boston Foundation negotiated with the artist and obtained certain intellectual property rights, sort of including the rights to sort of publish and use for their own sort of I guess sort of institutional and goodwill and advertising type purposes, you know, the designs of it, as well as, and I know this has been sort of something, an item of interest, as well as the right to make commercial, like basically 2D commercial reproductions of the piece. That right comes with a few basic restrictions that I think are of interest to us. First, you know, fine art reproductions. You all know what that means better than I do. Second, and most importantly, all of the proceeds from any commercial reproduction by TBF or any sub-licensee, remember that, must be used either to fund maintenance of the artwork, meaning go into the fund, or to support Embrace Boston in its nonprofit activities. So the artist gave TBF rights to reproduce and sell those, but said, you know, they can only use proceeds for those two reasons. So in other words, the artist did grant TBF those rights of commercial reproduction, but tied it to sort of supporting the piece and its institutional legacy and connection to Embrace Boston. The allocation between those two things, proceeds going straight, you know, into maintenance versus proceeds going to Embrace Boston and supporting its nonprofit activities, is left open-ended in this MOU. The reason for that is because TBF, I think reasonably, while being committed to the maintenance of the piece, wants to retain the flexibility of using proceeds if they turn out to be substantial. There's a high likelihood they will not. Sort of where they are most needed at any point in time. So we agree that since we are dealing with a good faith partner here, that is a reasonable approach, and it allows you know, a reasonable use of any proceeds. However, we believe that the BAC needs to be protected in allowing that sort of flexible ongoing allocation of proceeds if there are any. So what the solution there is that this MOU, the deed of gift that the BAC gets, will also sublicense all of the Boston Foundation or Embrace Boston's intellectual property rights to the BAC. That means we will obtain the same commercial reproduction rights. It is not the practice or necessarily current intent, I believe, of this commission to make commercial reproductions, but simply having that, even though we are really confident in our sort of like ongoing relationship with TBF, simply having that right allows us to address questions of allocation in the future if we feel that they're sort of not putting the appropriate amount of money towards maintenance or underutilizing the right or something that could be used to fund maintenance. We have the right to simply enter that business for ourselves. I'm not saying that the BAC has to. We're simply saying that you're being given those rights in order to sort of provide an added layer of protection with respect to how they are used or how any proceeds, if there are any, are allocated. One last thing about commercial reproduction rights. There is sort of a morality clause, right? Nobody can reproduce like sort of inconsistent with the spirit of the piece. And anybody who's reproducing, including the BAC, we have to show each other what we're doing in advance, basically to give ourselves, to give each party an opportunity to sort of enforce the MOU and the deed of gifts restriction on using it inconsistent with the spirit of the piece. So I think those are the three major pieces that I know are sort of new, right? Funding mechanism, commercial rights, and allocation of proceeds. I'm sure that I missed something, or I may have missed something. So I think given that, what I would say is two things. One, we are lucky to have some folks from TBF here, so there might be a couple questions about their business that they are able to address. But I'm also happy to answer questions if commissioners have them. But hopefully, thanks to Karen who helped me understand sort of what people might be wondering about. I tried to hit some of the questions at least in this presentation. So I'll invite questions now, I guess. And thank you all for listening to such a long spiel.
Thanks, Adam, and thanks for supporting us through this process. I'll open it up to questions from other commissioners, but I may start with one, which is the finances that are being held for the maintenance plan. It sounds like we could, let's say some terrible thing happens, we could withdraw a large amount. So it's not necessarily conceived of as a long-term fund that will last forever, or is it if we don't use it in that manner? I mean, is it something that will refresh itself and keep up with inflation? Is it essentially a longer term source? As we like to think in 50 to 100 years here on this commission.
So Mark, I think that's an excellent question. I will invite, probably I would assume there's a more financially expert person from TBF on this call with me, but legally, I think you framed it perfectly. This is not a trust fund, the principle of which cannot be touched, right? It's going to be sort of managed in accordance with their normal management practices. But right, if we had a big expense in year 3, we can get the money then, but it will deplete the fund. Now, we have real partners here, and who I think have a real investment in the ongoing vitality and state of this piece. But there, right now, we do not have, so I think that we can hope and expect that there will be additional fundraising, but the commitment is that 2.5 total. So you're right. If we had something really catastrophic happen, we could draw it down, but that would impact, obviously, this as a sort of source of annual, like meaningful maintenance funding. But I'll add to that, City of Boston understands that we're on the hook in the for the gap.
Thank you for making that statement too, because I do think that for us, that's a major concern, is that we have a very limited budget and we need to serve neighborhoods like Mattapan and East Boston and Roxbury, all of which do not have significant fundraising sources outside of the city in order to maintain artwork. So for us, it's really important that our limited resources aren't strained by one project in particular. As meaningful as that project is and as wonderful as it is, we also want to make sure we are able to maintain projects in other neighborhoods that really do need attention from us every year in and year out. So thank you for that statement. I really appreciate it personally. I did have one more question and then I'll open it up to my colleagues. How does the transition work in terms of financial responsibility, assuming that right now the piece is not in the hands of the city, we're not paying for any maintenance of it? When does the transition actually happen where we suddenly become the organization, and how will that work in terms of the access to the funding?
Yeah, we will become responsible for maintenance the day that we accept it. So that's just clearly a city obligation, and we need to be upfront and honest about that. It's not
That's
PBS
the
job
day
to
we
maintain.
accept it into our collection. That's the day that we vote on it as a commission.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, I can check while I'm waiting. I'll take a look. The MOU is pretty clear on this, so I'll just upon transfer of ownership of the artwork. So, yeah, when you accept. Sammy, I see that you have your hand up. I don't know if you have a slightly more nuanced or correct answer to that, but I want to pause my own answer to just see if you were going to add clarity there, Sammy.
Yeah, if I could, I think the way we read the MOU is ownership, and then therefore that maintenance obligation transfers when we hand over the deed of gift over to the city, which ideally that happens kind of upon your vote. But if there's any lag, like a day, for example, when you get the deed of gift and it's signed, the deed of gift is the operative document that then turns over ownership and all of the responsibilities to the city.
Okay, thank you, Sammy. And then my other half of that question is, do we have access to the funds at the very moment that that transfer happens?
I think the honest answer is no. I think there's going to be a little bit of a lag. They're going to have to set it up. I think we could get it very quickly. I think that we are going to ideally choose not to, so give that some time to breathe and exist and grow. But I think it depends. And again, I'm going to turn to Sammy for this. It depends on the exact date that they can get this set up, which we have been told is early 2023. So there could be a tiny lag in there. And again, the city understands this, and it would be a city financial commitment. But Sammy, I'm going to ask you if you wouldn't mind to provide some clarity about timeline of when the fund will be established.
Yeah, so, and I want to start off by saying that the foundation, as Adam said, being, really, we view ourselves as a partner here in this. There's a lot of flexibility there. What the MOU says is that the fund would be designated in, as Adam said, early 2023. I'm happy to report, though, that we've already taken the steps to designate it. So actually the fund is created and can and will be accessible in early 2023. We had gotten a request earlier, I think, from the city's legal team on, there's that annual grant part of this. So there's, two funding mechanisms, Adam said, the annual grant and then the draw or distribution above the grant, if necessary. We had asked if we can make that annual grant start in 2023. And the answer to that is yes. So the fund is designated. We can start with the annual grant in 2023. But to Adam's point about, letting the fund sit there, that of course is a great idea, because one thing that we did note to the city, and I don't know to what extent the commission is aware, but by holding the fund at the foundation, those funds are invested and there is income just from the investment of the funds. Over the last 5 years, the foundation's funds have performed at roughly 8.3% revenue of what is the kind of corpus or whatever is in the fund. So the more that the funds are, the more funds that are in the designated fund, the more opportunity it is to raise revenue over time, over and above the foundation's commitment. But we are flexible. We're here to support the city's maintenance needs, and those funds have been designated and are available in 2023.
Great, thank you. I see Kim has her hand up. Kim?
Yeah, I had a question about whether there are any limits to what can be approved in terms of the clause where the artist has to approve major changes like replacements or anything that have to be done. So one of my concerns is that is there a limit on how much that can cost? Because it's kind of to what you were talking about, Mark, in terms of what if there's a need for there to be a change, a repair that takes a huge chunk out of the fund. And again, there could be, based on different conservators' interpretations of a repair, one could be much cheaper than another. But if the artist wants the more expensive one, is there a limit on, how high that preference can go? Am I being clear with that? Like what
Yeah.
I'm asking?
You are, Commissioner.
Okay.
And that's, I think it's a great question. I sort of oversimplified that provision. The artist actually doesn't get to tell us at the end of the day how to do this,
Okay.
or which particular major repair to pick or something.
Mm-hmm.
However, this is a way of highlighting rights that the artist retained when producing this piece, right? And one of the rights the artist retained is, if you guys change this thing to an extent that I no longer believe it's a Hank Willis Thomas, I would like the right to disassociate myself.
Okay.
So, the sculpture is ours. If we have to fix it our way and we cannot bridge the artistic divide, his recourse is one that we do not want. I think it's really special that we have this artist
Yes.
creating this piece. So that's not where the Arts Commission is going to, they're going to figure this out with him. He's invested in the same thing that we are. That being said, I just want to be clear. He can't force any particular course of action on the city. He's just sort of saying, as an artist, if you guys change my piece,
Right.
you're not allowed to do that to me. So I think that's sort of the best way to think of it. But I did want to flag that right that he retained when transferring it has been added to the MOU. So I did think it was important to call out and to understand that while we own this thing and we maintain it and we can do whatever we do in terms of thinking about it as a piece of art, need to sort of stay in communication and respect sort of his understanding of how to best deal with major problems should they arise.
Absolutely. And I just want to say that this MOU I think it's a beautiful document in terms of covering every single possible thing.
I'm going to take a moment then to say thank you to Jacqueline, to Sammy, and to Nyla for that. I have like the talking head job here, and those are the people who really with their clients, with Karen and Sarah, and the whole team of I don't know the characters over at TBF and Embrace Boston, but it's those lawyers. So thank you for saying that, but I want to make sure that I don't say you're welcome.
Okay.
Other than on their behalf.
Well, I congratulate the many people involved then, because it's very precise, and for someone, and we have artists on the call and the commissioners, it's kind of covering every single thing that possibly has gone wrong in another in past public commissions, I feel, in history. So it's really a great document. Thank you.
Other commissioners that would like to make a question or comment?
Well, regarding the intellectual property, just to kind of be on the same page, this includes copyright and trademark. Let's say t-shirts, keychains, mugs, those proceeds would go towards the maintenance, to the BAC fund and the TBF fund.
Correct.
So yes, so then basically these to the design of said, let's call them products, would be determined by whom? TBF and the BAC.
The design of said products would be determined by whichever party is trying to exercise its commercial reproduction rights. So just to be kind of realistic here, I think in the first instance, we're talking about TBF or Embrace Boston, only because I don't think this is a business that the BAC has previously been in, nor is it something that the BAC was sort of really seeking here. We acquired the right just to create some additional security in what we know and trust will be a good, productive relationship going forward. So just to take the example kind of realistically, it would be TBF or, sort of some sub-licensee, some, I don't know, makes mugs.
Which then begs the question, does the TBF have a relationship similar to this with another sculpture monument, or has experience with this sort of scenario?
I don't know the answer to that.
I do not believe that we do. I think this is kind of a first of its kind, exciting project and partnership. But Kate or Keith, you're on. Am I incorrect on that? I could be.
Hi, this is Kate Gedge. I'm Senior Vice President at the Boston Foundation. No, Sammy, you are absolutely right. This is a new and unique situation for us.
Commissioner, I'll just add one last point there. Although it's TBF decided in that scenario, there are sort of two restrictions. One, there's sort of, I think, what we refer to as the morality clause, right? The derivative work shall reflect the spirit of the artwork. And they have to give us notice in advance of, here's the design that we think we're going to use. And if we think that it does not reflect the spirit of the artwork, therefore, hey, it's great if you're going to sell a mug and, one of two great things associated with the Embrace will get, 25 cents. But if we think that the image does not reflect the spirit of the artwork and will undermine the meaning in its place in Boston, we can push back. And realistically, I think it's going to be informal, but we do have a contract and we could go and seek to enforce our contract if the parties, and same works for them, right? We have the right. Either party feels that someone's reproducing something with a design that is really sort of undermining the spirit and meaning of this piece. There is a recourse for the other parties who sort of we all have a vested interest in its ongoing vitality and meaning. So.
Thank you. I think this clarifies just how unique and exciting this partnership is. So just to clarify also, so Hank Willis Thomas has given 100% of copyright and trademark to TBF and the City of Boston, BAC.
Sammy, since this is your contract between TBF and the artist, would you mind answering this one?
Yeah, sure. And for reference, our agreement with the artist that governs these rights is attached to the MOU. It's kind of attached to an attachment. I believe it's either Exhibit 2 or 3 to Exhibit C of the MOU. Just to clarify, he did not give us all of his copyrights or trademarks. So the artist, kind of in the spirit of making sure that the artist is the owner and beneficiary of his work, the artist keeps ownership of all of his intellectual property rights. But what he does in our agreement with the artist is he licenses to the foundation the ability to use images, graphics, design documents, and derivative works for purposes, nonprofit purposes of the foundation. And then on the commercial piece, the ability again to merchandise derivative works of the piece. But again, he restricts them solely for those purposes that are in our agreement with the artist that we've then carried over to the city. which is that 100% of the proceeds either go to maintenance of the Embrace or other nonprofit initiatives of Embrace Boston, not the foundation as a whole, but of Embrace Boston specifically.
Okay, thanks, Sammy. I see Cara, you've had your hand up, and then Aqua after that.
Yeah, and I don't know if that just answered my question, but I just wanted to be clear about, like, throughout the MOU, it says TBF and or Embrace Boston, and I just wanted somebody to, like, just to put a clarifying point on that, like, does when Embrace Boston is a separate nonprofit, how do these things apply then to TBF? And so if somebody could just say that again, that would be really helpful. Because I think even Camila, when you were just summarizing that, like, going forward, does TBF have some of the same things that we're describing as going to Embrace Boston, with TBF kind of functioning as the fiscal sponsor? Like, what stays with TBF or not?
Great question, Cara, and I'm happy to hand it over to our team if I miss anything. But the way, so I guess let me start now. Embrace Boston is a special project fund within the Boston Foundation. It is not its own entity. When King Boston changed to Embrace Boston, there was a name change, but that form hasn't changed. So it's still a special project fund within the Boston Foundation. There's no concrete plans to spin off as a separate 501c3 at the moment. That being said, there is a world in which that could change one day. So the way we set up the agreement with the artist is that the rights would go to the foundation, and to, at any point, if King Boston, under the agreement, now Embrace Boston, you'll see some dissonance there because when we negotiated that agreement, we were King Boston. At any point, if Embrace Boston spins off and becomes its own 501c3, it gets those rights. But the way that the agreement, our MOU, of course, with the city is set up, is that the foundation itself is the holder of the fund. The maintenance fund will be, I guess to use Cara's language, the kind of fiscal sponsor or supporter of this maintenance fund. You know, if one day the decision is made, okay, Embrace Boston is spinning off and Embrace Boston is going to take the fund and hold the maintenance fund, we probably then need to return back to the city and renegotiate the memorandum of understanding or assign it to a new entity. But you know, those are all kind of hypotheticals at this point. There's no plan to spin Embrace Boston out from the Boston Foundation as an independent 501c3. But yes, we did cover this situation in our agreement with the artist.
Aqua, you had a question?
I don't know if this is appropriate for an MOU with the city, but in many contracts, there's sort of a way to deal with things that might need to be mediated. There's a lot of things that could be negotiated in this MOU. If negotiations, say, come to a stalemate, is there going to be some kind of clause for mediation so that we can come to get on the same page if necessary?
I was thinking the same thing, Equa, wherein there could be, as perhaps in the past, the BAC has formed a separate ad hoc committee in order to just and deal with the Embrace Boston.
Sammy, you have a response?
I see Sam hand up.
Well, I'll turn this over to Sammy or Jacqueline, but the answer, the basic answer is the MOA or the MOU does not commit us to a specific form of alternative dispute resolution. Generally, actually, the city doesn't sign up for that for the simple reason that, well, you know, there's a lot of reasons. We typically don't seek those provisions in city contracts, but we do seek to resolve things short of litigation, right? So I think, you know, Sammy or Jacqueline, correct me if I'm missing this, but I do not think the MOU commits us to that, although it is our practice to talk and negotiate prior to litigating. So.
Yeah, So Adam, I think that that's right. I do not, I think to answer the question at hand, I don't believe there's a dispute resolution clause in this agreement. Agreement sounds, I don't like to necessarily use the word agreement. I like what it's called, which is a memorandum of understanding, which is this. I mean, I think we've approached this as truly a partnership. So this memorandum of understanding isn't necessarily about who gets what and who walks away with the most. I think it's written, I think to the other commissioner's point, it's an agreement that just covers every possible scenario that can come up on either side, and where there are gaps, we're really going to work together to resolve those. Just as an anecdote, it's not carried over into this agreement, but this idea of partnership kind of goes all the way down for the foundation to every part of this project. And we approached it the same way with the artist. We basically entered into an agreement that makes sure that the artist is fully protected and the foundation can totally support in perpetuity, his vision and his name in this work and the legacy of this piece. And in our agreement with the artist, we have a dispute resolution provision that says, listen, artist, if there are concerns, we're not gonna sit and bog everyone down in litigation. We're gonna mediate. If we can't mediate, we'll arbitrate, which is cheaper, and hopefully we can always avoid going to court. But there isn't a similar dispute resolution in this MOU. But Adam's exactly right. I think if issues come up, we're here to talk about it, because it's a memorandum of understanding. I think it's just memorializing our partnership. And then, at the end of the day, we recognize the Boston Art Commission is our regulator. We're not going to stiff the regulator when it comes to this, and we're happy to have conversations as things move forward.
Brian, I see your hand up.
Thank you. I had just maybe a similar kind of question. So thinking about the intellectual property piece and the reproduction works and the morality clause, I'm curious if you have a sense of who is making those kind of moral decisions, I guess, so on the part of the BAC. Would those decisions be made by the commission itself, or could those be handled at staff review? And then on the foundation side, I'm just curious kind of who would be making those calls?
For us, it would be, in the first instance at least, at the staff level. Right? We are lucky to have a staff that is really expert and knowledgeable and committed to public art. This piece in particular, and tasked with the ongoing job of maintaining this piece and its legacy. So I think that we would rely on staff to identify any issues. However, you're the commission. So you could say, staff, here's how we want to do this, right? For the first year, since this is new and we trust you, we still want to just take a quick peek at everything and make sure that we understand sort of how we're making decisions or what we're looking at. Or we could do it the opposite and say, just bring us anything that you find to be questionable or tricky. The MOU doesn't say, it's for us to decide, right? And by us, I mean you, right? The staff and the commissioners together. I do think that this is probably not going to be a high, I think staff can totally do this. I also think it's not going to be a high volume task, so it is something that I think staff could give commissioners really good insight into to make sure that you all are on the same page about how to proceed. And I can't speak for TBF. I will say the issue is not going to arise on their end until we decide to do a commercial reproduction, which is probably not immediate.
However, with the 400th anniversary of the city of Boston coming up, we may want to use this image, and right, our licensure would be something that would embrace in being reflecting this major anniversary of the city coming up. Correct.
That's a great point, but it's sort of a slightly different thing. Like I can imagine lots of things that we're doing. We're going to see this on boston.gov, right?
Mhm.
When the Parks Department puts together materials about Frederick Law Olmsted's Emerald Necklace and where it, and then how it joins sort of the oldest park in the country, we're going to probably see the, I think we're going to see the embrace in lots of work that the city does. And that, since we're not selling that stuff, TBF doesn't get to weigh in.
Got it. Sammy, you had one more point? You're muted.
Sorry, I'm never going to figure that out. To your question, just to highlight, in the MOU, we're sharing essentially we're sublicensing the rights that we got. And I think to the point you just made, there's some very broad language that, we're handing over to the city, which is we're giving the city the right to, and I'll try to go through some of these, reproduce, publicly display, and distribute any design-related documents, designs, images, graphics, video, digital assets, and digital images of the artwork in the course of distribution, reproduction, exhibition of the artwork by means or methods for the purpose of educational, record, public relations, publicity, promotions, fundraising, including, on websites and social media. And I think that really broadly covers this particular point, which is that, it's going to be a very important part of our city as we're approaching these celebrations. Will probably want to be used by the city in its publicity and its accomplishments. And I think the way the agreement is written is it very much provides for the city to be able to do that.
Great. Let's see if there's any last commissioner questions. I want to keep an eye on time. Seeing none, are there any comments from the public? Also seeing none, I think we could move to the phase of the meeting where we ask for a motion. Aqua, would you like to make a motion, or is another commissioner interested in making a motion?
I make a motion.
Okay.
So the motion is for us to vote on this MOU.
I think we'd be voting to approve the MOU.
Okay. I make a
Aqua,
motion to
Aqua, do you
approve.
want to give some more specific wording, or is she available?
Someone to approve, making a motion to approve the MOU between the BAC, the City of Boston, and the Boston Foundation as presented before the Boston Art Commission on October 31st, 2022, and recognizing that the City of Boston Mayor's Office has committed to support the continued maintenance of the sculpture, and then any other stipulations or following conditions that must be addressed before the MOU is signed, if there are any. That's sort of the format, Kim.
Okay, well, I think you should read that and then I'll second, okay? How about that?
Okay. I make a motion to approve the MOU between the BAC and City of Boston and the Boston Foundation as presented before the Boston Art Commission on October 31st, 2022, recognizing that the City of Boston Mayor's Office of Art and Culture, am I right there, has committed to support. I'm sorry, what?
I think just the mayor's office, because we're a division within the mayor's office. So keep it at the higher level if we can.
Okay, has committed to support the continued maintenance of the sculpture. And that's the motion. As I have heard, there aren't any stipulations, or if any commissioner has a stipulation that they'd like to address here, now is the time.
I would actually like it not to say Mayor's Office of Arts and Culture, because I think what we're asking for is to make sure that our limited funding isn't strained by this, that it comes from the mayor's office more generally, not from
City of Boston.
So then
Yeah.
it's just City of Boston, not Mayor's Office.
Yeah, just City of Boston.
City of Boston. Okay.
Okay, so who's making that motion? Kim?
No, Equa just,
Equa just made it. Do you want to
Yes.
second it, please?
I will second that motion.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Let me just see. I will read off your names, and if you agree with the motion, please say yes. Equa,
Yes.
Camilo,
Yes.
John? Yes. Kara,
Yes.
Brian,
Yes.
Kim,
Yes.
and I vote yes as well. So the motion passes unanimously. Thank you to everybody for walking us through all these legal questions. It's not all of our areas of expertise, but we really appreciate both the external help from the Boston Foundation, as well as the internal help from legal departments at the City of Boston. And I also want to call out how much our staff has been working on this. There's been an enormous amount of work by our staff to try to get us to this point. And they have been working tirelessly, and want to thank them for all the work that they've done.
Right.
So with that, I think we should move on to our next item of business.
It's quite an education.
Lots
So we're going to move on to the Memorial Moratorium on the Boston Common, which was initiated in 1988 for the BAC not to approve any additional projects. It was extended in 1995. And then in 2022, I believe it was temporarily lifted to, I'm not sure if it was 2022, but temporarily lifted to address this project, the King Boston Memorial. We have an opportunity today, now that the MOU is signed, we need to look at temporarily lifting the moratorium again so that the sculpture can be delivered and assembled on the Boston Common. And so that's what we're discussing now. I wonder if anyone has any questions about that, or any comments about that, or can shed any additional light on that.
Karen, will you be giving us some context on this?
Yeah, and sorry, that is 2020 that vote happened.
2020, I'm sorry. When I read it,
I mean,
that's not the right number.
yeah, no, I think we mistyped it.
No, I wrote it down. I
Oh.
wasn't reading it.
I think it's on, if we go to the slide before, Amber. For slide 17. Yeah, no, sorry, the other direction, apologies. Go to slide 17.
That is slide 17.
Next one.
Mhm.
I think we might have the wrong slide in.
Here, this is, no.
There it is. Oh, no.
Yeah. So the 2022 at the bottom, that was an error, which is now adjusted, but it's presented. So here you can see that this is the sort of timeline, the same way we had on our last item, just a quick timeline focusing on key points related to the BAC. In May of 1986, there was a report by some students from the Kennedy School of Government that was then used for a vote taken by the BAC. And when we did this last time, we found the documents related to this. So the idea was to not approve any more artworks for the common or public garden. And then in 1995, that was revisited to make sure it is inclusive of plaques. And you can see there's a very particular size. So also limiting the plaques on the common to no greater than 4 by 8. And so if we are to do signage for this project, it is important that that's included as well. And then in 2020, there was a vote during the preliminary design review for this project to temporarily lift the moratorium for the period of consideration. And so the key questions that we've seen on this are the specificity of the duration of the lift and the specificity of the site. The language in the last vote you took is to the right, bottom right on the screen there. A motion made by Commissioner Canizzo, who is not able to be with us because he had a conflict. But I believe the specificity is really related to interest in maintaining the moratorium generally, but lifting it for the particular installation that we're speaking about today.
And my understanding, or maybe my own view of this, has been that we have wanted to have, we have already lifted this because we believe in the artwork. We believe it should take place on the site. We are now reviewing it again because of the temporary nature of that, in order so that we can make the deadline of the shipping of the piece to the site. But one of our conditions, as we discussed in our last meeting, was that the MOU needed to be completed prior to lifting it, and that we have just voted on that. So I think personally that we're in a relatively straightforward motion here, but I want to open it up to see if there's any questions from members of the commission.
For context, a question. So it's called the Memorial Moratorium. Is this applying to all works of art, as well as works that have been deemed kind of falling under the memorial category as well?
Yeah, I think the language was artworks.
Okay. And then when we temporarily lifted back in 2020, can you remind me what was the actual duration of that lift then?
You can see the language. That's that last related motion there.
Is it worth reading that?
Sorry, yeah, it might be small. So the actual motion is Michael Canizzo moved that the BAC vote to approve a temporary lift of the moratorium on the Boston Common during the time it will take the BAC to consider the Embrace preliminary design review, and then seconded and so on.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Other questions from commissioners? Oh, I see Kara has her hand up.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, just for clarity around this motion, is a temporary lift actually the language that we want to use, or is it more about creating an exception or an exemption for this artwork? Like we're letting this artwork be installed, which requires lifting the moratorium. But I guess I'm just wondering, like, once that is installed, the artwork is there forever, right? So this exemption applies to that artwork in perpetuity. Like, how do we think about that?
That's a good question.
I would say we've moved away from words like perpetuity generally.
Well, right.
Yeah.
But what I'm understanding too is that existing works that were already established would not be required to be removed because we have a moratorium on new works, right? That's what the moratorium is, on new works of art. And if this one is in place, as long as it's legally able to be in place, I think then it would be not a problem to have the lift be temporary, but I'm not the lawyer here. So Sammy, you have a comment? You did work for us, so you may know that.
Well, no, I'm not going to frame this as advice. I'm going to frame it as what we would recommend. We cannot release shipping if the wording of this language is a temporary lift of the moratorium, which implies that at some point for this project, the moratorium could come back and essentially retroactively apply to the work, and it becomes an illegal, existence in the common. I think the motion we would like to see, so that we can comfortably tell the artist and the foundry, we've done what we needed to do. We've gotten the permissions to have you ship the piece, is that the Embrace be accepted from the application of the existing moratorium on the common. I don't think it's a temporary lifting of the moratorium. I think it's a motion to accept the Embrace from the moratorium so that the Embrace may be installed in the Boston Common.
And you, by accept, you mean EX?
Yes.
CET. Okay. All right.
Can I?
Yes, you are our lawyer, so you can give us advice.
Thanks, Mark. I think that's fine. I understand the way you all are thinking about the word temporary. I think that if our partners have a business problem with that word, your vote can protect the common without using that word. And I think that, you know, using the word accept or exempt the embrace from the memorial moratorium on the Boston Common, such that the embrace can be, I don't know what the right verb is, installed and maintained on the Boston Common, right? That way, I think that, you know, you can even say, you know, solely so that the embrace can be installed and maintained on the Boston Common. You guys can be very clear that this vote only lets the embrace on and it doesn't let anything else through. And our partners who we're relying on to get this thing created and shipped and installed over here, for whom the word temporary will cause problems with that work, I think we could sort of solve both. So.
I think the only thing to be aware of is that the signage we haven't reviewed yet. We need to do it another public meeting. So maybe to add, I don't know how we would address that. Adam, I don't know if you have that's because we haven't finished reviewing that. How would we have, like, how do we, if we want to be sort of specific and such, which I understand, Sammy's point, I don't think it would be an issue, but I understand the concern. How do we also say, you know, aspects of the embrace that have been approved or will be approved, maybe, like, because we haven't done that yet?
Right. I think that could be one of the conditions in the motion, that this exception doesn't include signage.
Would it be better to lift for just the sculpture and not any other ancillary elements, and then to have to do that when we approve them? That way there's no lack of clarity here that the sculpture, which is the thing that needs to be shipped now, can be shipped, but they can't ship signage now, for instance, because there's no signage to ship.
And it's not approved.
And it's not approved by us. So that might be clear. Sammy, does that make sense?
I mean, I think it makes sense to focus the moratorium on the sculpture, because I think that this is the holdup. We can't release shipping of the sculpture until the moratorium is lifted permanently for the sculpture. So if the moratorium is being lifted for the sculpture, I think, you know, I think that's exactly what we're looking for today. What we don't want is, and I don't think that we can, because then it's an outstanding issue that we can't assure the artist has been resolved, is to condition the lifting of the moratorium on some future event. But, you know, I mean, the jurisdiction of the BAC is clear. I mean, you guys review public artwork, and if there's an additional review, you know, under your enabling act, we need to come back anyways. So I think it's fine to focus the moratorium lift on the sculpture, because that's the one thing that isn't in the common that needs to be brought into the common. So I'm fine with that. But again, I think temporary is going to be an issue from a business perspective for us to tell the artist, hey, we've checked our boxes. You can release shipping timely.
Okay. Any other thoughts, or is someone prepared to make a motion?
I think I have a motion, but do we want to see if any members of the public want to make a comment first? Let's do that. And then I think we could probably talk through the motion a little bit. Can I try to read one and then you can put it up there? I'm not seeing any members of the public interested in commenting. Okay, so if I were to say, I make a motion, and we can talk this through so the language can change as necessary. I make a motion to approve an exemption of the sculpture of the embrace from the moratorium of works of art on the Boston Common. Do I need to say something more about as approved by the BAC with the following stipulations? That the MOU is signed with conditions approved today.
Can you say it again, Mark?
Okay, that the sculpture of the embrace from a moratorium works on the Boston Common as approved by the BAC, but I don't know if we need to put that closer to the sculpture. Maybe we should say of the sculpture of the embrace as approved by the BAC from a moratorium for works of art on the common, with the condition that the MOU is signed as approved by the BAC today. Does that language seem comprehensive?
Mm.
Do we want to say when we were approved by the
I
BAC?
wonder if we should say why we're doing it for the purposes of installation.
That's what I was going to say. I think I heard something like for the sole purpose of installation and maintenance on the Boston Common, or something kind of along those lines. To your point, Aqua.
Yeah.
Does that go after exemption though? Make a motion to approve an exemption for the sole purposes of installation and maintenance of the sculpture, the Embrace, as approved by the BSC.
Mhm.
Okay, so this is interesting. From a moratorium for the works of the art could come after an exemption from a moratorium for the works on art, and then we specify which artwork is getting that exemption. So that phrase would come after exemption. And should it be the moratorium, since there's only one?
Yeah, I think they. And I think one of the conditions might be excluding signage design, which will be approved in the
Which will
future.
be reviewed later. Let's not say approved.
Later, yeah.
At a later date.
Mhm.
Does this from a business, Sammy, you have a question?
Yeah, when there's reference to excluding signage design, what is being referred to? Because I think we run into issues if we're talking about anything that's already been constructed as part of the Parks Department's contract.
But we have not reviewed signage, so it hasn't been approved for the site, the artwork signage.
So like, what do we mean by that?
Well, there's a whole brand of signage that needs to be reviewed by us. That hasn't been yet. The interpretive information, what we call the artwork signage.
Is any of that in the common now? The signage is very broad, so I'm trying to understand, is there something specific about the project that's been shown to you that there is some approval necessary? Is it retroactive?
Yes, there is. There's some number of things that have been presented to landmarks that has not been presented to us yet.
So maybe interpretive signage, does that help with
Yeah, that could be.
description?
Is that what our term is for it, Karen?
No, we've just been saying plaques and signage. Sammy, are you concerned about the names on the plaza, or what are you worried about?
I don't know.
indicating?
I'm trying to figure out what this group is worried about, because I think what I'm getting at is, I don't know the status of the work today of the parks work. And if there is something there today that's already been installed that this commission wants to look at,
Sure.
I get worried then about handing a moratorium language like this to the artist and say, we're clear, ship the work. I think what we'd like to see, just so we have a clean bill to give the artist, is, because again, there's a moratorium, so anything that happens on the common is precluded. So I think if you just focus on this narrow exemption for the sculpture, I like the language, for the sole purpose of installation maintenance of the sculpture of the Embrace, then anything else that hasn't been reviewed, I think can be understood as still requiring us to come back and not exempted from the moratorium without having that language in there.
Adam, you have a comment to make?
Yes, thanks. I think that we could sort of be clear enough for both sides. Maybe if we just specify, maybe with a date, what as approved by the BAC means. So I might have this wrong, but I think it's as approved on March 9th, 2021. Like that's
correct.
the sculpture.
Yes, exactly.
That way,
Signage.
and that's the only stuff they've fabricated out west.
Yeah.
That's the stuff that they need to put on some trucks and get over here. And then we don't give any impression that if there's additional signage or something, that we have somehow said, yes, you can put that on the Boston Common. It's like if you voted on it on March, I think it's 9, 2021. So maybe if we could take a look at that language, and Karen, if you don't mind.
Excluding the last phrase after that, and excluding signage.
The only concern I'll say I have is that there hasn't been a sharing of different or before something's installed, that the installations haven't been run through the city. And so I do just want to make sure, because I know there have been internal conversations with the Disabilities Commission and such, that we do want to make sure that the signage is reviewed by them. I know those are ongoing, but I do want to make sure that we sort of see through our responsibilities on that. So that's my only concern, is because I know things have been installed without checking in with the city.
So I think, Karen, I think that that's a completely appropriate concern. I think that unless, I'm just trying to think of a way we can get enough clarity for everybody to operate moving forward. And if you all didn't approve it on March 9th, 2021, you're not lifting a moratorium here.
Sure, that makes sense to me.
So I agree, Karen.
What you're saying is you don't need the and excluding signage because that was not part of the March 9th, 2021 approval. Therefore, it hasn't been approved. Therefore, it's not excluded from the, okay.
Yeah, that's how I would see it. I do think it's helpful, you know, me being kind of new to this, to hear that there's these some signs and other things. And I think that it is important that we continue to sort of funnel information about these things that are a little bit outside the sculpture to the commission for your overall sort of picture of the piece as situated, because you all still have a vote coming up. So I understand that you need to be provided with all that information.
Okay.
I would just say that, you know, the interpretive signage is super important, and I don't want that to get lost in this lifting of the moratorium. That signage is how the citizens of the city of Boston are going to interact with this piece of work. And so I feel like I don't see the harm in mentioning it, because it is a part of the artwork in a way. It's not separate from. I just feel like I don't see the harm in including it, and somebody can maybe explain that to me.
I'll let Sammy go, and then I'll weigh in.
Yeah, the harm in including that.
Yeah, so again, we need to, the purpose of this vote is not, you know, simply procedural. We need to be able to tell the artist that we've checked the box. So we have an agreement with the artist, and under that agreement with the artist, the foundation is responsible for obtaining the permissions necessary and any exemptions to actually fulfill the shipping obligation of the sculpture, right? So our agreement with the artist is limited to the sculpture. We had a separate design agreement on the plaza with a different entity for anything kind of artwork out. So in our agreement with the artist on just the sculpture, we have this obligation to the artist. And so in order for us to say Song and Company, and your Song and Company being the entity that is providing the services of Hank Willis Thomas, you and your subcontractors can begin creating, getting ready for shipping for a timely delivery in November. my
For the
understanding,
sculpture- For the sculpture, correct, but
Right.
we're talking about something that's part of our purview that has not been reviewed with us, which is the signage, which is a different thing, so I
right,
don't understand how that's different. Or I
Yeah,
mean, how
so-
we need to do the same thing in both motions.
no, so we need to be able to release shipping of the artwork.
Which this
And-
would allow you to do, correct?
Right, which is what this moratorium needs to do. Now, there's this added language about signage design, and I do not know. I've not gone, I've asked, and I think the answer I'm getting is just interpretive signage. I do not know whether that includes any work done today by a separate contractor and a separate subcontractor for work that currently exists in the common, because if it does, and there's currently an issue about stuff in the common, and this moratorium being subject to that or conditioned upon that or referencing that, then I don't know that we've given a clean bill to the artist that we've met, we've checked off the obligation. So I think what we'd like is a clean lifting of the moratorium. Again, just as it says here, for the sole purpose of the sculpture of the embrace. And I think it was mentioned at this meeting, we need to come back to the next meeting with, signage issues, and everyone here from the foundation that's noted, and we'll work to accomplish that. But I think as Chairman Passek points out, the two are separate. And we need to kind of work with the artist, and then we're separately working with Mass Design on the plaza itself. For the artist, we want to be able to just send a clean bill. Hey, the moratorium's been lifted. You can release the sculpture. The artist himself is not involved in the other work around the plaza. There was some.
What if we were, okay,
Yeah,
so
I
what if we
think-
were to change the, perhaps we could change the motion slightly to say no, whatever of this should be interpreted as permission to include signage that has not already been reviewed, or something along those lines instead.
Because
You
the
see what I'm saying?
You can even make it, you could even say, you could put period after October 31, 22 and say, this lifting should not be understood to include any aspects of all of the work that have not been approved by the Boston Arts
Any
Commission.
work that has not been approved by the
That would
Boston
work for
Arts.
me.
That would work for me too.
Can I just quickly offer to Sammy, for your concerns, if the signage does come in at our next meeting, it's still before shipping, if that might alleviate some of your concerns as well.
No, but isn't your next meeting November 9?
November 8th. Shipping
No,
doesn't, you guys aren't shipping. You're creating November 2nd and you're shipping a couple weeks after that. I think you might
Yeah,
have been
but we're
given
not-
an inaccurate timeline.
Right,
Okay,
but
so I think I
we're not
understand your
releasing
position.
crating until we can ship. It's the purpose. The purpose to crate is to ship. So when we say we release shipping,
Like you
That's
will
the
not be
great-
shipping any signage because we have not reviewed it or approved
Right.
it, so there should be no issue. I
I
don't
think
see
we're
any
there
issue.
with that last sentence. I think we're there with that last sentence. If we can
Yeah.
just complete that, let's
So
try
can
to.
you repeat that, Sammy, what you just said, this shall not, or is it in your legal language?
let me try. I think I said, this motion shall not be interpreted to exempt from the moratorium any aspects of the work that has not previously been approved by the Boston Arts Commission.
Beautiful.
Okay. Yeah, I wonder if work is the right word. Yeah, maybe because it is more comprehensive.
I would say artwork and or signage for specificity, given the conversation
sorry.
we just had.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Thanks,
Adam?
Mark.
Okay, we
Can we
there?
hold off on the term artwork there? Only because
Hmm.
we did use it in the MOA and MOU. I don't know about other votes. Pretty specifically to talk about the thing that had received final design approval by the commission. So I just want to be clear that where I want this vote to end up is you are lifting the moratorium for the thing that you gave final design approval for, that they're building or manufacturing somewhere on the West Coast and that they're going to send over here. Other things
Like plaques and signage, which is how it's
Yeah.
addressed in the moratorium.
Yeah.
So aspects of the plaques and signage that have not been previously approved.
So I would love, if we could just stick with work. I think it's vague enough and clear enough to all of us, and we understand the intent of the vote. So sorry to jump in on that one.
Okay. All right. So shall I make this motion now? I'm so very good at making motions.
It's a
Sammy, did you have one more question?
Sammy, your hand is still up. Is that intentional?
No,
No.
sorry, Karen.
Okay. All right, so I make the motion to approve an exemption from the moratorium for works of art on the Boston Common for the sole purpose of installation and maintenance of the sculpture of the Embrace, as approved by the BAC on March 9th, 2021, with the condition that the MOU is signed as approved by the BAC on October 31st, 2022. This motion shall not be interpreted to exempt from the moratorium any aspects of the work that have not previously been approved by the Boston Art Commission. So would somebody like to second that?
Second.
Okay, so thank you, Brian, for seconding that. If you are in agreement, please say yes when I call your name. Ekwa,
Yes.
Camilo,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Kara,
Yes.
Brian,
Yes.
Kim. Not hearing from
I think
Kim.
she had to leave.
Okay, and I'm a yes as well. So we have quorum and all those remaining here voting yes. So the motion passes. Thank you very much, everybody, for working through this. Probably our most complicated motion in the history of my 10 years on the Boston Art Commission, but one worthy of a project that's perhaps one of the most important things we've looked at in the city in some time. So really great to have everybody working together on this. I believe our last step then would be to make a motion to adjourn the special meeting.
I make a motion that we adjourn this special meeting on Halloween, October 31st, 2022.
Thank you for some great wording there.
I'll second that, Ekwa.
Thank you, John.
Awesome. Thank you.
And if you agree with the motion, please say yes when I call your name. Ekwa,
Yes.
Camilo,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Kara,
Yes, thanks, everyone.
Brian,
Yes.
and I am a yes as well. So we are officially adjourned. Thank you, everybody. I hope you got a lot of candy tonight.
Congratulations.
Yes, and we look forward to next steps and to reviewing the signage very soon.
Thank you, everyone.
Have a great
Thank you,
day.
everyone. See you in next Tuesday.